Right, I guess that's working now. Welcome to week 4, section 3. How is everyone doing? So this week I'll be going over, I was thinking 4 topics, which I will show here. Arrays, string functions, conditionals, and loops. So sorry, I'm getting used to this. I was just working with this in full resolution. When I switch to the projector, it shrinks it up on me and makes things look a little weird. Okay, so I'm starting out with this JS fiddle. All I have is a unordered list with 4 items, just saying what I'm going to do. 2 divs with an ID of output 1 and output 2. I've got over here in the CSS, I put a border around output 1 and output 2 based on their ID. I gave them a border 1 pixel wide, dotted, and black. I also added a class over here that I like to add on everything, just a class for hiding things. So when I don't want to see this anymore, I can just do that. I just added an H to the class of the unordered list. So I just like having that so I don't have to deal with, so I don't have to do something like style equals display none. That just seems overly verbose. So that's what I'll be working on. We don't need that in the output, so I'm going to hide it now. So all that's displaying right now is the output 1 and output 2 over here. And in the JavaScript, I've got output the variable output going to document get element by ID output 1. So that's the first output div, and the second output div is output 2. And the reason I'm doing that is so that I can do this throughout the lesson. Just do output.innerHTML equals something, and then it'll put it there. I've declared a string to start us off of ASDF because I am very unoriginal, and an array to start us off with the elements A, S, D, and F. You can take a seat anywhere. So one thing, are there any questions about arrays or strings going into this? Arrays and strings are both containers, and they function mostly the same. The only difference is really an array. Well, the only main difference that you need to worry about right now is that an array can hold any value, not just a character, and a string just holds a collection of characters. So you could do something like getting the first index of a string the same way you can of an array. Getting the first index, which is going to start 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3 for this, and array 0 are going to return the same thing. And 1 is going to be S, and 4 is going to be undefined because there is no 5th element, because you've got 0, 1, 2, 3, no 5th element. So what can we do with arrays? We can add an element to an array. Let me change this array so it's actual words. All sheep don't floss. You'll notice I had to escape that that single quote because I'm wrapping these in single quotes. The other way I could have gotten around that is by making this a double quote, and then it wouldn't care that I had a single quote in there. So if I were to add an element to this array, I would typically use push. And now if I run this, you'll see that array 1 has been updated with a 5th element of regularly. So you see, I don't have to actually assign this to array in order for it to do what it's going to do. It just pushes it onto the array. If I wanted to take an element off of the array, I would use pop probably, which what that'll do is pop off the last element. Or if I wanted to take off the first element, I would say shift. These are things that you don't really need to know offhand. What you should know is how to Google, that's distracting, how to Google JavaScript array methods or something. You can probably just do JavaScript array, and it'll give you W3 school, and you'll get a lot of information on what you need. If you look for JavaScript array methods, you can find popping and pushing, which is what I was just doing. Shifting and unshifting is basically the same as popping and pushing, except it's the first element instead of the last. I mean, the only reason I know how to do these without looking that up is because I looked it up earlier today. So, in sort of preparation for this. So let's do some string functions, because we need that for something, right? Do we need that? What do we have to do this week? Let's look at the assignments. This is really bothersome. Week 4. So let's look at this fiddle quickly so I know what not to do exactly. Use the conditionals. Okay. Make the output so that it looks like that. So that's just a broken for statement that needs curly braces. All right. Let's look at the other ones. Assignment 2, type coercion. I was reading a blog post today about somebody who said we shouldn't ever teach type coercion in a beginning JavaScript class because it's too confusing. It is kind of confusing. I think you can handle it though. All right, so this is a matter of why does a string not equate to a number, which we can do. And what's the third one? I think what you have to submit for that is like an explanation too, which should be interesting to read. Okay. So this one's the looping through an array. Okay, well, we'll do some of that today. We'll do that right now-ish. So let's skip the string functions then. We'll just move on to working with strings and arrays together. One thing that I regularly end up doing is turning a string into an array, or turning an array into a string. In order to do that, I use the split and join methods. So if I use the split method on a string, if I did a string1.split, and I split it on nothing, it'll return an array with all of the elements in it. So it'll return the same thing we had originally in array 1, which is an array of A, S, D, and F. If I did that on something longer, it would do the whole string. Now that I have this array of characters, if I wanted to put it back together, I would use join, and I could join it on nothing, which would just put it all back together the way it was. If I wanted to get all of the words, I could say split on space. And that would give me each of the words and a separate element of the array, of this array 2. If I then wanted to join those words with two dashes, and then output it string 2, it would give me a string with 2 dashes instead of the spaces. I'm sure at some point you'll have to do that for your, you'll have to do something similar for your homeworks. So let's try We can just move on to looping through the arrays. Actually, let's do a conditional. Let's do a simple conditional here. If you'll notice over here in the output, I've got two borders. I don't know if they're. Let me see if I can make them a little bit easier to see. I've got two borders. One around output 1 and then one around output 2. Output 2 currently has nothing in it, so it's just a border with nothing. So I don't want that. I want it to not be there if it has nothing. So I'm going to add a conditional here. If output dot inner HTML equals an empty string, then output dot class name equals hide. So output, you'll remember, is actually document.getElementById output 1. If there's nothing in output, then I want to hide it so that the border doesn't show up. And this hide is referring to the hide class that I have in the CSS. So if I run this, nothing will change because there's something in output. So let's do the other one. If output 2 inner HTML is equal to nothing, output 2 class name equals hide. Now that that works. Okay. So the second one is hidden, and if I don't output to the first one, it will also go away. This is something used constantly. I mean, usually if you're doing this, you're using jQuery to do it, but we're not going to be using jQuery until I think week, I don't know, 20, 30. It's pretty far along. This is just a normal DOM object manipulation. So let's loop through array 1. There's a lot of different ways you can loop through. I'm not sure which is the easiest. I'm just going to go with not the first one that comes to mind, but the second one that comes to mind. No, the third one that comes to mind. Yeah, I'm going to do the third one. So for var I equals 0, I is less than 5 plus. So what I'm doing here is probably the most standard array you're ever going to see. The most standard loop you're ever going to see, a for where I'm declaring the variable I, setting it to 0, and as long as it's less than 5, I want it to keep doing this. And every time it does this, it's going to increment I by 1. So it's going to do it 5 times. It's going to do it when I is 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 5 times total. And the reason I chose 5 is because I know this array has 5 elements in it. But hard coding that in is not the right way to do it. So what we would want to do is var len equals that is not a function. That's just a So now I'm setting len equal to the array length, which I get by the array dot length, and then I can just put that in here. I could also do that inline, which is probably what most people do most of the time, because it's not likely that I'm going to be using that variable ever again. So just putting it in here is fine. I'm going to arbitrarily add a comma space to the end of each of these, so it's a little bit more clear on what's going on. So we're going to shrink that back down to 1 pixel. So that is one way to do it, one way to go through each element of the array. The way that I would probably use is a for in, which is a slightly modified for loop that just it's meant for objects and arrays. Using this in variable, I can add an array or an object here, and for each element in it, it'll run through it. So as long as there's another element in array, it'll go through. So output and that gives me the same thing. Let me change it slightly. And there's also another way to do this with a method that actually comes off of the array itself. So r1 dot for each yeah. I don't know why I keep retyping this. That's so silly. That didn't work. Great. Because I have an error. Nope. That didn't work because I'm doing it wrong? Maybe.
What should you do?
The same thing it did before. I'm just going to console log it. Right, because I is not declared. What's wrong with me? Yeah. So hopefully when you're going through this, you're using console log and not this output.innerHTML thing that I'm doing, which I'm mostly doing to save real estate on the page, so I'm not using up half the page on the console log. But sometimes I still have to bring it up. Yeah. So it functions a little bit differently. The item that's being sent to this function is the actual element, not the index, as it is in the previous two examples. But this one is not something you should really worry about for another few weeks, probably. It's also significantly slower than either of the other two. Sometimes it makes sense, though. We can go over that at a later time. Why? All right, so that's a loop through it. Let's do... Let's do an array of numbers. And let's loop through them. Let's do this way so you can get... No, let's just do the for in. Make this more explicit. Index R1. And let's declare a variable sum. And we'll run through them all and add up everything. So sum plus equals R1 index. So what that's doing is going through each element of this array, which are just some random numbers I threw together, and it's adding each one as they come up to sum. This statement right here means the same thing as sum equal. I used this earlier and I didn't explain it. Sum equals sum plus. So it's taking the original value of sum and adding the what's in it, and we're starting sum with 0. So let's say we only want to add together the even numbers. How we do that is we'd use something called modulus. Modulo. Modulus? Modulo. We'll go with modulus. And that is the percent operator. So all the percent operator does is divide two numbers and return the remainder. So let's say 5 modulus 2 is going to equal 1. Because if you divide 5 by 2, it has 1 as a remainder. If you did 10 modulus 3, that would also be 1. Now, the only thing you will ever use modulus for, probably, unless you're doing something more fun, I guess, more fun than web development, is you'll always be using modulus 2. That's just what we always do, and that is to determine if something is even or odd. So if let's set this. I'm going to set a variable in this for loop called current, and that's going to be R1 index, just so we're clear on what's going on. If current modulus 2 is equal to 0, then it's even. And if it's even, we will add it to the sum. So what would that give us with these values? If you want to do the math in your head, be 78, right? Did everybody get that? So it is indeed 78. If we just add in all of the odds, it happens to be 58. So I think that shows up in your homework multiple places. It's in this week and in the unit project. So that's a basic conditional within a loop. Are there any questions?
What's the advantage to creating a variable off of a variable? At least that's what it kind of looks like.
What's the advantage of creating a variable off of a variable? This line here?
Yeah.
The advantage is our one index might not have meaning at some point. It might be confusing. It's readability. So current is telling you this is the current number that we're working on, rather than having it as an array index element. We're giving it its own value so that it's easier to understand what's going on. In this case, it probably didn't matter all that much because it's only 2 lines that we're using it in. But it's usually a good practice to do that sort of thing.
But it would fail if it wasn't defined someplace else, or something else.
It would fail if it wasn't defined because current is used here and here now.
Right. But the array has to be someplace else in this example, either way.
The array is being used in the loop. So every time it goes through the loop, it's getting it from the array. It would work the same if I had this in place of current. I'm not sure what you're...
And it's still going to fail if we didn't say array 1 above.
If we didn't use it here? Oh, here?
Yes.
It's going to have a weird failure if I take that out and it's the original value that's just that. And in fact, let's try that because that's a place I wanted to go. 0. That's do you have any idea why that is? It starts with 0. It goes into this loop, loops through all of them, gets the current value, so all that's fine. When it does this modulus operation, though, this is where it encounters an issue. This is always going to return false. It's never going to be true. And that's because whenever a numeric operation is done, like a modulus, this goes through something. This goes through the number constructor, which is similar to parseInt, which we talked about last week, I think. If you'll remember, let's do. So I've got this number 45. Actually, it would probably be better if I do this in a console log. Or it won't be better, because it's not actually showing me that it's a string. Anyway, this is a string. This is not a number because I put it in quotes. Let's do a type of? Yeah, okay. That's probably a better way to do it. So that's a string. If I do like a parse int on this, that would turn it into 45, the number. So if I did like 45 and some characters after that, it's still, parse int still does that. However, if I use the number constructor on this, that works fine. But if I do that, num1 ends up not a number. Because number is expecting it. It'll correct if you have it as if it's a number as a string, but it won't like parse out a number from that string. It will only accept digits. So what's happening is here it's doing sort of a number current on that. And if current is a string, it'll return not a number. And then if you say not a number modulus anything, it will always return false. This will always be a false statement. It'll never be 0. So I think I tiptoed around that without actually answering the the assignment's question, without answering it completely. Maybe I did answer it completely. All right, what else can I do? How much time do I have left? 4 minutes? Actually, I started 5 minutes in, so more like 10 minutes. Let's see if there was anything else that I wanted to do here. I don't know, unless you want to do string functions, like slice, substring, and substr, index of, which I don't know, I think they're being used in the Unit 1 project, or some combination of them. I'll do a little bit of that then. If I did a, let me make sure I'm not outputting anywhere. I just kill that. So index of is somewhat useful and will probably be useful in your homeworks. This is something you pass it a string and it tells you where it shows up in the string that you're using. The string that we're using is this is a string. So we're going to look for this.
So is this a search functionality you're using?
I don't think you'd be using index of for searching much. It's a very specialized string function just for this.
So when would you actually use it?
When you're trying to do string manipulation. Some string manipulation. Easy string manipulation. Because anything too complicated, you're going to want to use a regular expression, which is, I don't think we do that here. But this sort of gives you an idea for how strings operate. If I'm looking for string, it's going to give me 10, which means it's the 11th character in. It starts at the 11th character in. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11th character is the first character of string. So output in HTML. Let's do substring. Or substr. One of the more annoying things about these functions is that substring and substr both exist, just to confuse you. So both of these functions exist. Right, they don't take a string as a value, they take a number as a value. So the number that we got for string was 10, right? So if I put 10 in, it will not work apparently. Because it needs 2. It needs the length. Really? Oh. Because string doesn't exist. Yeah, sorry. Anyway, so these are slightly different. Let's do 0 and 5 for both of these, which is this. So if I do 1 and 5 for both of them, you'll see it starts to become a little different. So that's because it is, the first one is substr, is getting the length. The second argument is the length of it. So the first argument is where you're starting, which is element 2. So 0, 1, 2 is this I. And then 5 is the length. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For substring, it is the endpoint, not the length. So if we're starting at 2, we're starting at this I, and we're ending at 5. So 2, 3, 4. Wait. 5? I'm wrong here. Hold on. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm confused now. Sorry.
Can we change it to text so we can see the example?
What do you...
Is that if this is a string, we need...
Sure.
How about that?
Oh, okay. Well, I did that on purpose. Come on. So I was going to use that later with replace.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're right.
I see.
Anyway, and then there's a slice. Which does almost the same exact thing as substring, except it'll take negative values. So you're going to get the same solutions for these, except when you do -2, which in slice, a -2 will give you from the end of the string. which is not what I really wanted at all. Maybe it's substring that can take negative values, not slice. Anyway, the best way to know this for sure is to go JavaScript, string functions. Index of, last index of, search, slice, substring, subster, starting index, ending index. So yeah, best thing is for you to go through and just take a look at this. Let's do a replace. See, I need this now. So I'm going to replace is with isn't. And this gives me thisn't is a string because replace is grabbing the first instance of is. So how we would deal with that is, there's a few ways to deal with that. Let's do that. We can add a space on each side. So it's searching for space is space. Or we could do some kind of regular expression shenanigans, which would look like but that's kind of ridiculous. What did that do? That was the same thing, it was just written differently. I didn't really think this example through. What I'm doing is I'm looking for a space is space. If I wanted to get both of the is's, if I wanted it to be this isn't a string, thisn't isn't a string, I would have to use a regular expression because replace can only do one thing. So I would do is global. Isn't a string. Isn't. Anyway, I don't know if replace is actually used here, but it is used reasonably frequently. We have a couple of minutes left. Is there anything that you want me to go over?
Can you briefly touch on what's expected from the peer review? And I have not watched anything unless the discussion for peer review.
Yeah, no, because I don't know. I only started reading about them today. But we can take a look.
That's okay.
Where are they? It's not reflection. It's,
Under assignments.
yeah, I'm trying to find where under assignments it was.
Actually, I think it's in the week. I think it's the first lesson. Or lesson one. Sorry, so I skipped it.
I just saw. It would be really helpful if I could actually read these. The screen was a little bit bigger. No. Is it linked from modules, maybe?
Yes. Right
There it is. Okay. So did you get notified by Canvas? I'm not really sure how this works. You got like a person's name and
You get two.
you got two, okay.
And then, like I said, I didn't do this yet because once we do the lessons, we're right into the section. Immediately panicked. I'm sure I can figure it out.
Okay, so we've got a rubric here, which is completely not readable on my screen, and probably not readable up there.
So we have the answers, so we're like basically correct.
Yeah, yeah. Which I think is a great idea. I'm not entirely sure how it's implemented. I don't know how you got the people you got assigned.
Yes, and some people do not actually do the homework. It's like it's less just people who are based on the
There's not a lot of auditors actually. There's I only in my section, which I only think I have one or two. I'm grading I think 30 people. So that's spread out over all of us. So not many auditors actually. Are you an auditor? No. Okay. You're a real student. Real student.
I'm sure we can figure it out.
So do you understand what, I guess, well, the solutions are here. Do the solutions actually
Yeah, like I said, I haven't even looked at it. I just
enter number one?
yeah, correct.
Enter a string.
Somebody else's
SDF.
usually sends fear. And I noticed that some people embedded questions within. Out of the two people I glanced at it quickly, they embedded questions within the comments.
They embedded questions, like in here?
Mm-hmm.
Questions to the grader?
And I did something similar too, because I was like, I hope the this works type of thing, hoping somebody would come back to me with some kind of information to use me to say like, ew, not.
Yeah, no, if it worked, I don't think I have much to say about it. I mean, you got it. Good job.
Right. No. It was more than
If it doesn't work though, I mean, yeah. Feedback will come to you, don't worry about that.
Yeah, I mean, code review is part of everyday work life, so.
It should be.
Yes. So, but if, on that note, if we are doing something wrong, somebody actually takes notice and course corrects us before tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah.
Good.
All right, that is it.
Thank you.
Great, there's a key combination I can never quite remember. Nope. 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 Nope.